The Ninth Legion, Legio IX Hispana, was once one of Rome's most feared military units. Forged in Spain, they won glory under Julius Caesar during the Gallic Wars and later served under Emperor Augustus, helping secure Rome's empire. Famous for their discipline and courage, they stood as a symbol of Roman power, until they mysteriously disappeared, leaving behind one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. The year is 183 AD. The Roman Empire is in turmoil. The aging Emperor Antoninus has just died, and the throne has passed to his young adopted son, Commodus, who will go down in history as one of the worst Roman emperors ever. Marcus Aurelius, Antoninus's other adopted son and heir apparent, had recently died of plague, leaving the succession in doubt. And Rome was being harassed by Germanic tribes across the Rhine and Danube. Meanwhile, a force of 5,000 Roman soldiers have been missing for nearly 2 decades after disappearing into the wilds of northern Britain. And now an old soldier named Gaius Plinius Secundus has finally come back with news of what really happened to them. You've probably heard of Pliny the Younger, the famous Roman writer whose letters give us insight into daily life in the 1st century. But while he's often called Pliny the Younger, his full name was actually Gaius Cassius Pliny Secundus, or just Pliny. And although he became famous as a writer, Pliny's first love was the military. After studying rhetoric, poetry, and philosophy, Pliny joined the army, eventually rising to the rank of military tribune under the Emperor Trajan during the Dacian Wars. He then served as governor of various provinces before becoming the imperial legate of the 9th Hispaniensis, stationed in the province of Britannia. It was here that he would learn the truth about the fate of the Lost Legion. To understand the mystery of the Lost Legion, we need to travel back in time to the year 78, when the Roman Emperor Titus Flavius Vespasianus, better known as just Vespasian, took the throne after a decade of civil war. To put it mildly, the state of Rome's finances wasn't great, and so Vespasian enacted a series of unpopular reforms to bring the empire out of debt. One of these reforms included raising taxes in Britain. Now, this wouldn't have been such a big deal if the Romans had been generous in their grants of land to the local chieftains after conquering the island. But as it was, the Romans had conquered most of southern and eastern Britain by this point, but had not really made any concessions to the locals. So the tax increase came off as nothing more than exploitation. And this discontent would soon boil over when a slave revolt broke out in the province of Judea, a Roman province which encompassed the land of ancient Israel. Rome's allies, the client kings of the region, were no match for the Jewish rebels, so the emperor sent in 2 legions, the 6th and the 9th, to put the revolt down. The revolt's leader, a man named Shimon bar Kokheba, is still regarded as a folk hero in modern Israel today, and he certainly lived up to his reputation in the historical record. As soon as he heard that the Romans were sending troops to put him down, he led his men into the mountains of Masada, where they built a base of operations from which they could launch hit and run attacks against the Romans. But despite the bravery of the Jews, the might of Rome was too much, and after 5 years of fighting, the Romans crushed the revolt, slaughtered the rebels, and rebuilt the temple in Jerusalem. But at what cost? This war had drained Rome's treasury and its manpower, and so the emperor decided to raise new legions from among the recently conquered peoples of Britain to fight in his far-flung empire. Now, while we don't know exactly who was conscripted into these legions, some historians believe that a significant number of Britons were among their ranks. Unfortunately for them, these newly raised legions were sent to put down yet another revolt, this time in the province of Pannonia, which encompassed roughly modern Hungary and Austria. The revolt was led by a chieftain named Brico, who, like Simon bar Kokheba, was regarded as a champion of the oppressed by those who lived under Rome's thumb. But again, Rome's forces won the day, and the empire's borders were secured. Or were they? In the following years, the border regions of Germania and Dacia were constantly raided by Germanic tribes who harbored grievances of their own against Rome. In response, the Emperor Hadrian decided to send 3 legions into the region, the 9th, the 14th, and the 20th, to teach the natives a lesson. The legates of these 3 legions were Gaius Julius Caesar, Titus Flavius Silva, and Quintus Petilius Celer. But the task given to these men was nearly impossible. They were ordered to march through the heavily forested lands of Germania, find the main villages of the tribes, and destroy them. But Hadrian's generals struggled to do any of this. Not only did they lack maps, they didn't even know what Germania looked like. Even the emperor's own descriptions of the region were vague and inaccurate, probably because he had never seen it himself. But eventually, the legates set out on their mission. Petilius headed south with the 9th, and Caesar went north with the 14th, while Silva stayed behind with the 20th as reinforcements. And within months, disaster struck. First, Petilius and the 9th disappeared without a trace. Most likely, they were defeated and absorbed by a local tribe. Then news came that Julius Caesar had also been defeated. The 14th Legion had marched into an ambush, and nearly all of its men were killed. Only Silva and the 20th escaped, but not without taking heavy losses themselves. The Germans had proven that they could stand toe-to-toe with Rome's armies. And so the emperor realized that if he wanted to conquer the region, he would have to commit more resources to the effort. And so the emperor sent in 2 more legions, the 7th and the 8th, to help fortify the border regions. But then disaster struck again. A marauding band of 3,000 Germans attacked the Legio Secunda, killing or capturing all of its men. With morale in the province plummeting, the decision was made to send yet another legion to the region, the 9th Hispaniensis, under the command of the experienced legate Gaius Plinius Secundus. But upon arriving in Pannonia, he learned that the 9th had gone missing. The emperor suspected that they had simply deserted, so he ordered Pliny to find them and bring them back to face trial. But Pliny believed that something else had happened to them. Either they'd been wiped out by a German attack, or they'd been taken captive by a local chieftain. So Pliny spent the next 15 years scouring the region for any sign of the missing legion, talking to informants, tracking down leads, and chasing rumors. But his efforts turned up nothing. Eventually, he gave up the search and returned to Rome, bringing with him the tale of the lost legion. Now, when Pliny told the story, he claimed that the 9th hadn't actually gone missing, but had been completely destroyed by the Germans. But as it turns out, there may have been survivors, members of the 9th who made it out alive but chose to hide in the forests of Germania rather than return to the empire. We know this because in the year 193, another Roman army was sent to Pannonia, and one of the generals, Publius Helvius Pertinax, brought with him a guide who knew the region well. And this guide immediately led the Romans to several villages inhabited by people who spoke Latin and wore Roman clothing. These people were almost certainly veterans of the 9th Legion who had managed to escape destruction. But their story didn't make it into Roman records until centuries later. In the meantime, the mystery of the 9th Legion remained unsolved, giving rise to wild theories about what could have happened to them. Some said that they had been transformed into a Germanic tribe, while others said they were still trapped in a subterranean cave. But in reality, the 9th had simply been defeated and absorbed into local populations, except for a few stragglers who survived in hiding. Eventually, the Emperor Trajan took the throne, and he would go on to conquer Dacia and Germania. But even he couldn't stop the endless raids from beyond the borders. In fact, during his reign, Rome suffered its greatest defeat in the north as 20,000 Roman soldiers were wiped out by Germanic tribes. But enough was enough. Trajan reorganized the defenses along the Rhine and Danube and launched a massive campaign into Dacia, crushing its tribes and ending their raids once and for all. So what can we learn from the story of the Lost Legion? For one thing, it shows us the lengths to which Rome would go to protect its borders, sending in legion after legion to quell rebellions and stop incursions. It also shows us the tenacity and determination of the generals and soldiers who fought along the frontiers, as well as the hardships and dangers they faced. But perhaps most importantly, It shows us the resilience of the human spirit, as well as the adaptability and resourcefulness of the people who lived on the fringes of the empire. For while the Ninth Legion may have been lost, its soldiers lived on in body and in spirit, absorbed into the very cultures that they had come to conquer. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching.